Hello, Newsmax Daily Podcast family. Today is August 14th, 2025. My name is Kay Smythe-Hill, filling in for the Tony Marino, the man, the myth, the legend that is Tony Marino, on this beautiful day. But don't worry, Tony will be back with you tomorrow. We have a great show lined up for you today with hits from Carl Higbie and Benjamin Netanyahu. We're going to talk about the normalization of leftist corruption against Trump. But first, we're going to dig into the crime crisis running rampant across American cities, mostly blue cities. And I think none of us who've lived in these cities, hopefully if you have lived in them, you've gotten out. If you're still living in them, you live in a safe neighborhood. But I'm no stranger to this fact that we have a problem here in America. It's allowing the worst among us to perpetuate the worst behaviors. You know, when I first moved to America 10 years ago now, I lived in Southern California. And despite having some of the lowest educational levels in the Western world, thanks Hollywood, and the ongoing corruption within the state education system, the people of California were kind, they were generous, they were honest, they were fair, they were funny. And where I lived in Venice Beach, there were maybe 4 homeless people. And within less than a year, all of that changed. We went from being this beautiful, thriving metropolis to essentially an open-air prison camp. And of course, it happened much sooner in places like San Francisco, like Denver. Then we saw it sweep across the country and it hit New York, it hit DC. And there was only one option to save us all, and that includes the people suffering from mental illness, that includes the people getting wrapped up in gangs and organized crime and other petty violence and criminal activity. And it was the only option that Democrats would not entertain, and that was jail. So you speak to anyone with former addiction issues, anyone who's previously involved in gangs and organized crime, the single thing all of these people have in common in their rehabilitation: they were all arrested, they were all thrown in jail, and that is where they saw the light through either finding God or rediscovering Him, or being provided actual help towards their anti-recidivism. And they rebuilt their lives. There's so many great books I could recommend on this. I'm not going to go into it now. But for anyone with friends or a family member or a colleague who's having a complete freak out about Trump's federalization of law enforcement in DC and the actual crackdown on these criminal activities, then please remind them that the mental health crisis in most of these cities is at a genocide level. That's how many deaths we're seeing. And please remind them that no one with addiction issues or crime issues wants them, and that prison is the number one thing that stops those cycles of deprivation, that stops those deathly behaviors. That is science, that is a fact. And so for more facts today, we're going to head over to Rob Finnerty for his take on this issue. And, you know, it's Rob, so as always, he's got a great take.
The left wants to make everything about race. They always have. We're not going to do that. We're going to make everything about facts as best we can. Facts that the left don't want you to hear about. Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. attorney in Washington, tweeted pictures of 45 of the victims murdered in Washington over the last several months, some in 2024 and 24 of them this year. The youngest, a 3-year-old little girl who was killed by a black man. Think about that, 3 years old. Do you still think that Washington, D.C. doesn't have a crime problem? Remember, we thought that Black Lives mattered. Take a look.
Over here are the individuals who were shot and killed under the age of 20, all teenagers in 2025. And the number here is 16. Again, all members of the minority community here. I am here today to tell you that on behalf of all of these victims, all of these families, that they're going to be accountable, that we are going to make a difference, and that we are going to make sure that law enforcement is focused on these innocent, now silent victims of crime in the district.
It's also not a coincidence that all this started getting worse when Joe Biden was in the White House. A president that did nothing well while he was in office has apparently been talking about crime for decades being bad in Washington, but he never did anything about it. even when he was president, even when he had the power to do something. Not even Barack Obama, our first black president. He did nothing when he was in office. Barack Obama identifies as black, which is fine. That's his prerogative. But Barack's father largely abandoned him. He was raised by his white mother and his white grandmother in Hawaii, and that's a fact. And neither of them ever did anything about crime in D.C. until Donald Trump came along.
Driving home, my staff who lives here in the Hill reminded me, don't stop at a stoplight until I'm out of town. If I see a red light late at night, since there's very little traffic, slow up at the other block so I never come to a full stop except in the middle of the block because of carjackings. Stopping at a light, people standing in a corner, walking up with a gun.
Joe Biden, 1992. Again, Democrats care about the vote of black people, but they don't really care about black people. And this disconnect between Democrats and black America is getting more clear by the day. It started in November when a huge percentage of black people voted for Donald Trump. Especially when a black woman in America who works in the media, who lives in Washington, who used to work for Kamala Harris, seems to be missing something really, really, really important. Listen closely to the two neighborhoods that Simone Sanders tries to compare to each other. Take a look.
You don't think more police make streets safer?
No, Joe. I'm a black woman in America. I do not always think that more police make streets safer. When you walk down the streets of Georgetown, you don't see a police officer on every corner, but you don't feel unsafe. So what is it about talking about places like Southeast D.C., right? Ward 8, if you will, that people say, well, we need more officers to make us safe. I think we have to rethink what safety means in America.
Safety in America, Simone, is simple. It means not getting shot or mugged when you walk out your front door. Once again, the left makes everything about race. We're not going to do that. But for whatever reason, no one is comfortable bringing this up. Joe Scarborough certainly didn't want to touch what she just said. But Ward 8, the neighborhood she just referenced in Southeast Washington, is a majority black neighborhood. It is not a good neighborhood. It is not safe. It is one of the most dangerous parts of the city, one of the most dangerous parts of any city in this country. In Georgetown, another neighborhood she referenced, is a majority white neighborhood. And it's not only one of the safest parts of the city, it's one of the wealthiest. And we don't say that to be mean or to bring up race. We say that because that just happens to be a fact right now. That a wealthy black woman living in Washington wants to pretend is not an issue, but it is an issue. An issue that Democrats have always tried to pretend doesn't exist. A black neighborhood in Washington, D.C. is one of the most unsafe in the city, and a white neighborhood happens to be one of the safest right now. Now, why do you think that is? And do you think that more police officers on the street might help that problem? In 2024, 77% of all black children born in Washington were born to unwed mothers. Do you think maybe that's part of the problem here? Do you think maybe these children would benefit from having both a mother and maybe a father around the house? We'll let you decide at home. But did you know that a Washington, D.C. police commander was just suspended for allegedly making changes to the crime numbers in Washington, D.C.? And did you know that according to the Media Research Center, in a study they did this week, CNN and MSNBC cited those fake numbers 73 times over a 24-hour period, meaning millions of people were told a lie for an entire day about the crime in Washington, and they were told that it's not that bad.
You know, they did exactly the same thing in California. I'm sure they're doing it across most blue cities and states. In fact, some of these Democrat-run jurisdictions changed the very definitions of certain crimes. They made felonies misdemeanors, all to pretend that crime is on the decline when it was skyrocketing. I mean, talk about gaslighting, talk about an abusive relationship. Thankfully, in the year 2025, big media is finally focusing on the facts. So let's head over to Bob Brooks, who filled in for Rob Schmidt last night. We're going to listen to Bob talk about what President Donald Trump is doing to stop this normalization of violence. Everything he has to say on this matter resonates.
It has officially started. President Trump calls it the liberation of Washington, D.C. The National Guard has entered D.C. as the federal takeover of our nation's capital. To stop the rampant crime is now underway. Agents from Homeland Security and the Drug Enforcement Agency working with D.C. police as law enforcement arrests over 100 people so far. How about that? Facing charges of narcotics, firearms, even homicide. 23 of those arrested are, guess what, in the U.S. illegally. ICE today announcing they are conducting raids on the National D.C. Mall. The president is also going to physically clean up the Capitol. There will be a major beautification undertaking as well. To me, everybody, this is the end result of woke, or I'll call it for what it really is. It's the Democrat Party, because they're the ones who push it. President Trump, his administration, the GOP, now have to come to the rescue because woke drove our nation's capital right into the ground. Democrats, who have always controlled Washington, D.C. since its inception, there has never been a Republican mayor, have taken their policies, failed policies, and political correctness to the edge, and they've pushed it over. It doesn't work. Political correctness doesn't work when it comes to crime. Being soft on crime doesn't work as much as Democrats hoped it would. And as I'm going to tell you tonight, being woke and politically correct, it ruins a lot of stuff, and people are sick of it. So how and why did we arrive to the point to where there has to be a federal takeover? Did you ever think about that? Well, President Trump, he talked about it earlier today.
They're stuck. They don't know what to do. They have probably more, I would say more than half are sane, but they are led by insane people.
That's really it in a nutshell. And look at where these people in worshiping being politically correct got us, starting with the nation's capital. Even ABC News anchors are having to admit there's a big problem.
I can tell you firsthand here in downtown D.C. where we work, right here around our bureau, just in the past 6 months, there were 2 people shot. 1 person died, literally 2 blocks down here from the bureau. It was within the last 2 years that I actually was jumped walking just 2 blocks down from here. And then just this morning, one of my coworkers said her car was stolen a block away from the bureau.
So that was Kyra Phillips, and I'm sorry that happened to her. I'm sorry, a lot of bad things have happened to a lot of people. And here's a thought, maybe, just maybe, Democrats, they would wake up and say, hey, we actually have a chance to work with Republicans on this one and make things right for the American people, but they're not. They try one of 2 tactics. They either try to play the race card.
There are many cities in between Washington and Chicago, Washington and Oakland. He only chose the black ones. So it is clear what he's trying to do. He's trying to race bait.
The president has always been intimidated by the intellectual prowess of black men.
Part of what we see Trump doing, my dear friend, right, is telling a story that justifies the fact that he believes we are a white republic. That's what he's doing.
No, he wants to stop crime, and when that fails, it's resist. That's the mandate they're all getting from the top. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, he's one of them, and posted this. Violent crime in Washington, D.C. is at a 30-year low. Donald Trump has no basis to take over the local police department. Well, it's the old nothing to see here approach. Well, I'll tell you what, Congressman William Timmons of South Carolina responded directly to Jeffries, and I think he made a pretty good point. It's the same one I'm making tonight. This is what he wrote. Democrats like Jeffries would rather preserve dangerous cities than admit their policies fail. They stink. And that's really what this is all about. It is failed woke policy. Things have now come full circle. And we're at the point where Trump and company, they simply just got to take things over. That's it. In fact, President Trump was asked earlier today at the Kennedy Center a question about working with Democrats on something, about working together. This is the point he made, and I think it's a pretty good one.
It's almost a waste of time to meet because they never approve anything. They just don't want to prove anything. They just, we meet with them and they say, as Nancy Reagan said, just say no. They go, oh, just say no. They're afraid to approve anything.
And he's right. How are you going to work with them?
I love Bob, but let's stick with the president right now and see what he has to say about how the left is absolutely fine with corruption. This next clip from The Right Squad, which is one of my favorite panel shows on television, we're going to focus on what the left did during Trump's first term that made it so difficult to get anything done. And guys, if this isn't an advertisement for why everyone needs to go out and vote in the midterms next year, I don't know what is.
Totally phony, created by Adam Shifty Schiff and Hillary Clinton and the whole group of them. And it made it very dangerous for our country because I was unable to really deal with Russia the way we should have been. I'm looking at Pam because I hope something's going to be done about it. These people put our country at great danger. And Adam Schiff, it was all made up. It was a hoax. The Mueller report came out. They all hated me. They had 18 Trump haters. And they said I did nothing wrong. They couldn't believe, they couldn't find anything. After years of investigation, it was all a hoax. It was a hoax created by the Democrats, but in particular Schiff and Crooked Hillary, the whole group. And now hopefully something's going to happen with it. These are people that put our country in danger.
We're going to talk obviously more about Trump's upcoming meeting with Putin, but while we're focusing on the Russia hoax, Chris, how do you think Trump's perspective on this hoax that did have such a cloud over his first term? Remember, Time magazine had the specter of the Kremlin taking over the White House, all based on complete fiction published by BuzzFeed, which BuzzFeed doesn't exist anymore as far as I know. But, I don't think they would have published the entire Obamagate report with no questions like they did for the completely debunked and falsified Steele dossier. How do you think Trump's reaction to what we continue to learn about the Russiagate hoax is going to inform his meetings with Russia itself?
Oh, very interesting. I hadn't really even thought of it through that prism. He might have some questions for him that he may get some answers to, and I hope that he does. Honestly, President Trump is looking, the Democrats couch it as they frame it as it's his revenge tour. He's trying to get revenge. He's trying to get to the truth. Now, these people did everything they could to destroy his presidency and destroy him and to bankrupt him and to ruin him. And he's just, he was just running for president. He came down the escalator and he's like, hey, ain't this grand? Next thing I'm going to do. And then this mob ganged up on him. And one of the things that I find amazing is that the Democrats, from the average Democrat voter on the street to the average Democrat in the anchor chair at NBC to the average Democrat like Adam Schiff on Capitol Hill, not only do they not care if the FBI is corrupt and the CIA is corrupt and the Washington Post is corrupt and the New York Times is corrupt. I combined them.
We like the Washington Times.
And the Washington Times is great. I have it right here, as a matter of fact. But the left is fine with all this corruption as long as they're targeting Republicans. Mm-hmm. And they're happy to live in a very corrupt city, in a very corrupt world, with a corrupt media, a corrupt Democrat Party, a corrupt intelligence community, a corrupt FBI and Justice Department, as long as they're doing the bidding of the Democrat Party. And I just got to say, I'm not that political. I've never been that political in my life. I could never dream of a day where the entire intelligence community of the FBI or the entire Republican Party was so corrupt that they would launch the biggest lie you've ever heard of, and as long as they got the other guy, it'd be good with me. I can't imagine being that corrupt.
Or that organized. Republicans aren't that organized. We can pull it off, but it's just shocking, the two tiers of justice. I mean, the Clintons, the things they have gotten away with for decades. Yeah. We don't know where the bottom of it is, but yet imagine, the laws that Hillary Clinton broke as Secretary of State, and yet has not one day paid the price.
Deleting thousands of emails with bleach, then asking, with a cloth or something like that.
With the Clinton Foundation.
I think that this Russiagate thing, especially as we're seeing Trump talking with Ukrainian leaders again, or European leaders, we'll talk more about it later, but I do think as you look at it in the context of the Russiagate hoax over here, it probably doesn't bode particularly well for Putin, because I think that you're seeing Trump go all in all the time to say, look, this was such a hoax, and a great way for him to continue making that point is to say, okay, look, I'm just going to go ham against Putin. He gave him this deadline that, again, we'll talk about later on over here.
And for our final clip today, we are going all the way over to Israel, where Newsmax anchor Carl Higbie is reporting in 100-plus degree weather to bring you the latest on what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is dealing with in his own country, and just how corrupt and evil the Hamas side of the Israel-Hamas war has become. We all knew that these people were monsters. And I think after you listen to this, you are going to be so grateful. I know that you are already. You're going to be so grateful that we have President Donald Trump in that White House, because with the number of people that the left let in over that open border, I think we avoided something really catastrophic. And I think we're going to continue to avoid something really catastrophic with him in charge and taking control of things, just like Mr. Netanyahu has done. So we just have a snapshot of the episode for you today. The full interview can be found over on Newsmax's YouTube channel. I highly recommend going over. It's a 15-minute clip. It's not going to take any kind of time out of your day. You can throw it on in the background while you're making dinner. You can make a point of listening to it before, well, I probably wouldn't listen to it before you go to bed. It might give you some nightmares, the full clip. But this is fascinating, groundbreaking news brought to you always and only by Newsmax.
Imagine being the leader of a country that's been in the most perpetual conflict globally since probably biblical times. Israel was attacked by all the Arab nations around them the day they declared their independence in 1948. They were attacked again in 1967 from all sides, miraculously not only defended off Jordan, Egypt, Syria, but they won land in just 6 days. That was the Six-Day War. And it followed in 1973 and 1982. And then there were the intifadas. There were suicide bombers where they blew themselves up on buses in public areas. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is the longest-serving prime minister in Israel's history. Not only has he been a target politically and facing corruption charges, but he's been leading Israel through, some of their worst periods since October 7th, 2023. Here's my exclusive interview. Mr. Prime Minister, honored to be here, sir. We were supposed to be here a month ago, but obviously you had some problems with Iran, which yesterday you had mentioned that you're interested in the Iranian people overthrowing this regime potentially. That could be a huge change in the region if that takes place, sir.
Yeah, but it has to come from the people. It wasn't one of our war aims, but it could be one of its results, because I think that the picture that they had of this overpowering bullying force, that fanatical regime that can sweep everything in its way, I think that's been cracked by our action, by the fact that President Trump made this bold decision to join us. I think it just cracked this veneer of invincibility. Mm-hmm. And that applies not only to the region and to the prospects of destroying completely the Iranian axis, the terror axis, and opening the path for peace, but also inside Iran itself. Because the Iranian people yearn for freedom. They yearn to be free from almost half a century of this terror tyranny. And that could very well happen, but it's really up to the people themselves.
Well, I think in America, a lot of people don't know the threat of Iran. You're geographically much closer, but in Iraq, I had an Iranian built and sold and paid for and provided for explosive kill 3 of my friends right next to me. So, how do we educate people about how bad Iran is and how much influence they actually have in the region beyond their own borders?
Well, just look at what they say and look at what they do. What they say is death to America, death to Israel. But death to Israel because Israel stands on their way to conquering the Middle East and going after America, or building ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles tipped with nuclear weapons that could reach the United States. So for them, their goal is America. Mm-hmm. They tried twice to assassinate the President of the United States, Donald Trump. They killed, as you said, your colleagues and wounded and killed thousands of Americans with their IEDs in Iraq, Afghanistan. They bombed American embassies. They murdered 251 Marines in Beirut. Mm-hmm. This is a force of fanaticism that is aimed to destroy our common civilization.
Do you think if Iran had a nuclear weapon, they'd use it on Israel immediately?
They say they would. And one thing we've learned in Jewish history, if somebody says they're out to annihilate you, the way Hitler did, well, believe them.
Fair enough. Putin, obviously 30 years in your position, you've had to deal with Putin before and obviously partners and trade and things like that he deals with. Trump is set to meet him in Alaska. Do you think that Trump can, obviously you know President Trump very well, do you think that they can work something out to get some peace in Ukraine, and do you think Putin's going to play ball with that?
Look, if anyone could do it, it's President Trump. I nominated him for the Nobel Prize because, with his leadership and our partnership, we did the Abraham Accords, which brought, after a quarter of a century of no peace treaties, we brought 4 peace treaties between Israel and Arab states in 6 weeks. And he showed that what his leadership can do. He's just done it with Azerbaijan and Armenia. And so if anyone can do it, I think President Trump can do it.
Yeah. I want to get to some domestic issues for you. I've spent now almost a week here, talked to a lot of people, been to a lot of places. And it's one of the reoccurring questions is people, after October 7th, Israel is known worldwide for its intelligence capabilities. You guys are phenomenal at your intelligence. But October 7th got by. How did that happen? And how do you reassure people that you're ahead of the next one?
Well, I think there were clear failures there of intelligence, operational mistakes, and many others, and we'll have to examine all of them without exception. So that's not the problem. The problem you have is not that you can't fail. It's what do you do when you hit, you rise up.
And that is our show today, folks. My name is Kay Smythe-Hill, filling in for Tony Marino. Tony will be back with you tomorrow on August 15th, 2025. Today is obviously August 14th, 2025. Thank you so much for listening to the Newsmax Daily Podcast, and God bless you all.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.